My sister-in-law said, "You aren't truly family. You're just who my brother settled for." And I smiled because I'd been waiting 3 years for her to say that in front of everyone. I can still feel the icy dread that tightened its grip on my stomach every Sunday we pulled into my in-laws' driveway. But this time, watching my sister-in-law, Brittany, with her predatory smile from the living room window, I knew her plans for me were darker than usual. The engine finally cut, leaving a hollow silence that amplified the chirping crickets in the humid evening air. A warm, yellow glow spilled from the house's windows, promising a warmth it never truly delivered. David's hand on my back, meant to comfort, felt more like a push towards an inevitable firing squad. "Just try to have a good time tonight," he murmured, switching off the ignition. I wanted to ask him when I'd ever had a good time here, but I swallowed the bitter thought, just like I always did. We walked up the path together, his hand still on my back, a gentle weight that used to make me feel protected. Now, it just guided me towards another evening of being treated like garbage by his sister. Before we could even knock, the door swung open. There was Brittany, her eyes raking over me, taking in the nice dress I'd spent an hour picking out as if I'd shown up in sweatpants. Finally, she purred, stepping aside. "Sarah, perfect timing. I need help in the kitchen." "No, hello." "No, how are you?" Just an order, as if I were staff she'd hired for the evening. David's parents were already settled in the living room, his father in his usual armchair with a drink, his mother flipping through a magazine. Neither looked up. Neither said a word about Brittany's tone. "The real family can relax in here," Brittany continued, waving David toward the couch. "Sarah, come on. You've finally found something you're useful for." My face burned. David squeezed my arm. I looked at him, and there it was, that pleading gaze, the slight shake of his head, the silent message, "Please don't make this a thing. Just keep the peace." So, I went to the kitchen. Brittany followed, listing tasks before I even had a chance to wash my hands. "The vegetables need to be cut. The salad needs to be tossed. And try not to mess up the dressing this time," she added with a smirk. "Last week, it was way too oily." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, grabbed a cutting board, and started slicing carrots. The kitchen was big and bright, magazine perfect, and I'd spent more time in here over the past 3 years than I'd ever spent actually feeling like part of this family. I tried to focus on the rhythm of the knife, ignoring Brittany hovering behind me. "Not like that," she snapped, snatching a carrot from my hand. "You're cutting them too thick. Don't you know how to cook?" I adjusted my technique without a word. "I guess not everyone grows up learning the basics," she said, her voice sweet like poison. David really should have married someone who knew how to take care of a home. From the living room, I could hear David laughing at something his father said. He was 20 feet away. He could probably hear every word. He did nothing. I kept cutting. Brittany kept criticizing. The tomatoes were too big, the cucumber too thin, the wrong knife for the peppers. Every single thing I did was wrong. And every correction came with that tone, the one that made it clear she thought I was stupid, useless, and utterly not good enough for her brother. "Speaking of taking care of things," she continued, leaning against the counter as if we were just two sisters having a normal chat. "When are you and David finally going to give Mom and Dad some grandchildren? They're not getting any younger, you know." The question hit me like a physical blow. She knew. She knew David and I had been trying. She knew about our struggles. And she still asked, like it was my fault, like I was failing at yet another thing wives were supposed to do. "We're working on it," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but steady. Brittany replied, a sound dripping with judgment. "Well, don't wait too long. Although, honestly, maybe it's for the best. Not everyone is meant to be a mother." I gripped the knife tighter, my knuckles white, and said nothing. When the food was finally ready, I helped carry everything to the dining table while Brittany directed me like I was a caterer. The family gathered, David pulling out my chair for me in that polite way that looked good but meant absolutely nothing, considering he'd spent the last hour ignoring everything his sister had done to me. Dinner started with small talk about work, the weather, and some neighbor I'd never met. I ate quietly, contributing only when asked a direct question, otherwise just trying to get through the meal without another attack. Then Brittany cleared her throat, that unmistakable sign that she had an announcement. "So, I've been doing some research," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "And I found the most amazing resort for a family vacation this summer. It's got a private beach, incredible restaurants, and the rooms are gorgeous." David's mother clapped her hands together. "That sounds wonderful." "It really does," Brittany continued. "I was thinking we could all go together. Me, Mom, Dad, David." She paused, her eyes sliding to me with that little smile. "It would be nice to have some quality time with just the immediate family, really reconnect." I waited. I waited for someone to say something. For David's mother to point out that I was family, too. For his father to include me. For David to speak up and say his wife was obviously coming with them. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. David reached for his water glass and took a long sip, his eyes fixed on the table. His parents nodded along with Brittany's vacation ideas, discussing dates and room arrangements like I wasn't sitting right there, like I didn't exist at all. I swallowed the anger rising in my throat and picked up my fork. Another Sunday dinner. Another evening of being reminded that no matter how many years I'd been married to David, no matter how hard I tried, Brittany would never see me as family. And apparently, neither would anyone else at this table. So, after another Sunday of being treated like the help, I did something I'd never done before. I started keeping a journal. That night, I sat at my desk while David was in the shower and wrote down everything that happened, every comment Brittany made, every time David looked away instead of defending me. I wrote it all down with dates and times. The next morning, I added the text messages she'd sent me over the past few months, taking screenshots and saving them in a special folder on my phone. Brittany thought I was just the pushover who'd take it forever because I loved her brother. She had no idea I was building something. The next family dinner was in 6 days, and I had a plan forming in my head. I was done being the silent target. Monday morning at work, I found myself staring at my computer screen without actually seeing anything on it, my mind still replaying every moment from Sunday dinner. Chloe walked up to my desk with 2 cups of coffee like she always did, but she stopped short when she saw my face. "Okay, what happened?" she asked, setting one of the cups in front of me and pulling up a chair. I looked around to make sure no one else was close enough to hear. Then I told her everything. The kitchen comments, Brittany's constant criticisms, the vacation planning that deliberately left me out, the grandchild question that felt like a knife to the gut. Chloe's eyes got wider with every detail I shared. Wait, she said, holding up her hand. "David was right there in the next room, and he didn't say anything?" I shook my head. "He never says anything. He just gives me this look like he's begging me not to cause a scene." Chloe sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "Sarah, this has been going on for 3 years. 3 years of you going to these dinners and getting treated like garbage, and your husband just sits there." When she said it like that, out loud, it sounded even worse than it felt. "He thinks if he stays out of it, things will eventually get better," I offered, but even I could hear how weak that excuse was. "That's not staying out of it," Chloe said, leaning forward. "That's picking a side. He's picking her side every time he stays quiet." I wrapped my hands around the warm coffee cup, not drinking, just holding it. Part of me wanted to defend David. He loved me. I knew he loved me. But loving someone and standing up for them were supposed to be the same thing, weren't they? "Does he even see what she does to you?" Chloe asked, her voice softer now, like she was afraid to push too hard. "Or does he just not care?" The question hung in the air between us. I didn't have an answer. I wanted to believe he cared, but was just bad at confrontation. I wanted to believe he didn't fully understand how bad it was. But deep down, I knew the truth. He saw it all. He heard every comment. He just decided that keeping peace with his sister was more important than protecting his wife. Chloe reached over and squeezed my hand. "You deserve better than this," she said. "You know that, right?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it. 3 years of being told I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong, that I was lucky David had even married me. After a while, you start to wonder if maybe they're right. The morning passed slowly, and by lunchtime, I'd made a decision. I was going to call and actually talk to him about this. Really talk, not just hint and hope he'd figure it out. I found a quiet corner in the break room and dialed his number. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, what's up?" he said, and I could hear the sounds of his office in the background. "I wanted to talk about Sunday," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "About how Brittany treated me at dinner." There was a pause. "What about it, Sarah?" She spent the entire time criticizing me. She made comments about me not being able to cook, about us not having kids yet, about how you could have done better. And then she planned a whole family vacation and didn't include me. I waited for him to say something. To apologize. To acknowledge that his sister had crossed a line. "That's just how she is," he said, and I felt my heart sink. "She's always been like that. You can't take everything so personally." "How am I supposed to take it?" I asked, my voice rising. "She literally said I'm not part of the immediate family." "She didn't mean it like that," David replied, and I could hear him typing in the background, like he was only half paying attention. "You're being too sensitive. Brittany just has a strong personality. If you just ignore her comments, she'd probably stop making them." I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers to my forehead. "I've been ignoring her comments for 3 years, David. It's only gotten worse." "Look, I have a meeting in 5 minutes," he said. "Can we talk about this later? Just try not to let her get to you, okay? I'll see you at home." He hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the break room, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. "That's just how she is. You're being too sensitive." The words echoed in my head like a verdict. I wasn't being too sensitive. I was being abused by his sister while he watched and did nothing. But apparently, pointing that out made me the problem. The rest of the workday crawled by. Chloe checked on me a few times, and I told her about the phone call. She didn't say "I told you so," but I could see it in her eyes. She'd been warning me about this for months. By the time I got home that evening, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work. David was already there, sitting on the couch, watching something on TV. He smiled at me like our earlier conversation had never happened. "Hey, how was your day?" he asked. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. I looked down and saw Brittany's name on the screen. My stomach tightened as I opened it. "For Sunday dinner, you need to bring that beef dish from the French place downtown. The recipe is online. And make sure you do it right this time because we all know you don't contribute much else to this family." I read the message twice, making sure I wasn't imagining it. She was literally demanding that I cook an expensive, complicated dish while also telling me I was useless. The nerve of her, the absolute nerve. I walked over to David and held out my phone. "Look at this." He took the phone and read the text, his expression not changing at all. "Okay," he said, handing it back. "So, you'll make the dish." "What's the big deal?" "The big deal." I could feel my voice rising. "Did you even read what she wrote?" "She said I don't contribute anything to this family. She's treating me like I'm nothing." David sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Sarah, just make the dish. It's easier than fighting with her about it. You know how Brittany gets when she doesn't get her way. Do you really want to deal with that drama?" I stared at him, waiting for something more. For him to acknowledge that the text was cruel. For him to offer to call his sister and tell her to back off. For him to show any sign that he was on my side. Nothing. He just turned back to the TV like the conversation was over. That's when it hit me. Really hit me, in a way it never had before. I was completely alone in this marriage. David wasn't neutral. He wasn't stuck in the middle. He was on Brittany's side, and he always had been. Every time he told me to keep the peace, every time he dismissed my feelings, every time he let his sister treat me like dirt without saying a word, he was making a choice. And he never chose me. I looked at the text message again, at those cruel words that Brittany had put in writing. And I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't sadness anymore. This wasn't hurt or disappointment or the desperate hope that things would get better if I just tried harder. This was clarity. Brittany thought she could treat me however she wanted because David would never stop her. She was so confident, so sure of herself, that she didn't even bother hiding her nastiness in texts anymore. She put it all in writing, thinking there would never be consequences. She was wrong. I saved the screenshot and added it to my folder. The expensive dish she wanted? I was going to make it. I was going to show up to Sunday dinner with a smile on my face, just like I always did. But I was also going to be ready. Because the next time Brittany came for me, I wasn't going to sit there and take it. I had a folder full of proof. I had 3 years of patience that had finally run out, and I had absolutely nothing left to lose. After that conversation, something shifted in me. I wasn't sad anymore. I was strategic. I picked up my phone and called Chloe. And this time, I told her everything. Not just the surface stuff, but the deep truth I'd been avoiding. She listened to all of it. And then she said something that made everything click into place. "Sarah, David isn't neutral. He's choosing Brittany every single time by doing nothing." She was right. I'd been making excuses for him. But silence was a choice, and he kept choosing wrong. The week that followed was different from any week I'd had in the past 3 years. I spent hours in the kitchen practicing that beef dish, following the recipe step by step until I could make it with my eyes closed. But the cooking wasn't really what I was preparing for. Every night after David went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my journal, and I practiced. I practiced what I would say when Brittany made her first comment. I practiced staying calm when she criticized my cooking. I practiced looking her in the eye instead of looking down at my plate like I always did. I even practiced in front of the bathroom mirror, watching my own face to make sure I looked confident instead of scared. It sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but I needed to be ready. Brittany had spent 3 years catching me off guard. This time, I was going to be the one with a plan. By Wednesday, I had the dish perfected and my responses rehearsed. And I was starting to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt strong. Then Thursday happened, and everything got so much worse. I was at my desk at work when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message said, "Hey Sarah, this is David's Aunt Carol from the reunion last year. I just wanted to reach out because I heard things haven't been easy for you and David lately. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." I stared at the message for a full minute, trying to figure out what she meant. Things hadn't been easy? What had she heard? I typed back, asking what she was talking about, and her response made my blood run cold. "Oh, honey. Brittany mentioned at the last family gathering that you've been having a hard time adjusting to married life. She said you've been difficult lately, and it's been causing some problems between you and David. I just wanted you to know that marriage is hard, and it's normal to struggle." I read those words over and over, feeling sick to my stomach. Brittany had been talking about me to the extended family. She'd been telling people I was difficult. She'd been making it sound like I was the problem in my own marriage. I thought about all those family events over the past few years, all those cousins and aunts and uncles who gave me weird looks or seemed a little cold. I'd always blamed myself, thinking I just wasn't good at connecting with new people. But it wasn't me. It was Brittany poisoning everyone against me before I even had a chance. I was still sitting there in shock when Chloe came over with our usual afternoon coffee. She took one look at my face and pulled up a chair. "What happened?" she asked, and I showed her the text. Her eyes went wide as she read it. "Are you kidding me right now?" she said. "She's been spreading rumors about you?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Chloe handed back my phone and then got this strange look on her face, like she was deciding whether or not to tell me something. "Okay, I wasn't sure if I should mention this," she said slowly, "but I think you need to know. I ran into someone at a coffee shop yesterday. David's cousin, Mark." My heart started beating faster. "What did he say?" Chloe took a deep breath. "We got to talking and your name came up. He said Brittany told him that you've been trying to isolate David from his family. She said you don't want him spending time with them and that you've been making him choose between you and them." I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "She said what?" "She's been telling people you're the one causing problems," Chloe said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "She's been making you look like the bad guy this whole time. Mark seemed really surprised when I told him you go to every single family dinner and Brittany treats you like garbage. He had no idea." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This was so much bigger than I thought. Brittany hadn't just been cruel to my face. She'd been running a whole campaign behind my back, turning everyone in the family against me while I smiled and tried to keep the peace. Every time I thought I was being the bigger person by staying quiet, she was using my silence against me. She was telling everyone I was difficult and controlling while I was in the kitchen doing whatever she told me to do. The worst part was that it had worked. All those family members who never quite warmed up to me, who always seemed to take Brittany's side, who looked at me like I was an outsider even after 3 years of marriage, they believed her. They all believed her lies about me. I left work early that day, telling my boss I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't even a lie. I felt like I was going to throw up. I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to figure out what to do next. David was already home when I got there, working on his laptop at the kitchen table. He looked up when I walked in and smiled, that easy smile that used to make me feel safe. "You're home early," he said. "Everything okay?" I stood in the doorway, looking at the man I'd married, the man who was supposed to be my partner, and I asked the question I was dreading. "Did you know that Brittany has been telling people I'm difficult? That I'm causing problems in our marriage? That I'm trying to isolate you from your family?" David's face changed. It was subtle, just a flicker, but I saw it. He knew. He already knew. "Sarah," he started, and his voice had that careful tone he used when he was trying to manage me. "Where's this coming from?" "Just answer the question," I said. "Did you know?" He closed his laptop and sighed. And the sigh told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "I heard some things," he admitted. "But I didn't want to make things worse by bringing it up. You were already upset about how Brittany treats you at dinner. And I thought if I mentioned the other stuff, it would just make you more stressed." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You knew your sister was spreading lies about me, and you didn't think I deserved to know?" "They're not lies exactly," David said, and I felt my jaw drop. "She's just sharing her perspective. She thinks you don't like her, and sometimes perception becomes reality." "You know, her perspective?" I repeated. "Her perspective is that I'm trying to steal you away from your family? Her perspective is that I'm the problem?" "David, I go to every single family dinner. I cook whatever she asks me to cook. I take every insult and every criticism with a smile because you asked me to keep the peace. And you're telling me you knew she was saying these things about me, and you just let it happen." He stood up and tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. "I was trying to protect you," he said. "I thought if you didn't know, it wouldn't hurt you." "Protect me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "How is letting your sister destroy my reputation protecting me? How is letting everyone in your family think I'm the villain protecting me?" "You weren't protecting me, David. You were protecting yourself. You were avoiding a hard conversation with your sister because that was easier than standing up for your wife." He didn't have an answer for that. He just stood there, looking at me with that helpless expression, like he was the victim in all of this, like I was being unfair to him. And that's when I finally understood. Brittany hadn't just been cruel to my face for 3 years. She'd been running a whole operation behind my back, turning every family member into someone who would take her side, making sure that if I ever tried to speak up, no one would believe me. It was calculated. It was deliberate. And David had let it happen. He'd watched his sister destroy his wife's reputation with his own family, and he'd done nothing because confrontation was uncomfortable. He'd known about the lies and chosen to keep them from me, not to protect me, but to avoid dealing with the mess. I thought about all those times I'd questioned myself, wondering why I couldn't connect with his family, wondering what I was doing wrong. I'd spent 3 years thinking I was the problem when the whole time Brittany had been making sure I would always be the outsider. I walked past David and went to our bedroom, closing the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my journal, adding this new information to the pages of evidence I'd been collecting. The lies, the rumors, the campaign against me, David knowing and saying nothing. 47 documented incidents in 8 months. Text saved, witnesses noted. Sunday dinner was in 2 days. This time when Brittany came for me, I wasn't going to be silent. I was going to be ready. The lies hit different than the insults. Insults I could ignore, brush off, pretend didn't hurt. But Brittany had been poisoning everyone against me while I smiled and made nice at every family event. And that was something else entirely. And David knew. He knew and said nothing because standing up for me was too uncomfortable for him. Chloe called me before bed and told me I should just leave him, pack my stuff, and walk away from all of it. Maybe she was right. Maybe that was the smart thing to do. But first, I needed everyone to see who Brittany really was. Sunday dinner was in 2 days. This time when she came for me, I wasn't going to be silent. I was going to be ready. Sunday came faster than I expected. Or maybe it just felt that way because I'd spent every moment leading up to it preparing for what was about to happen. I woke up that morning feeling different than I'd ever felt before a family dinner. No dread in my stomach. No anxiety making my hands shake. Just this calm, steady feeling like I was finally ready to do what I should have done years ago. I spent the morning cooking that beef dish, following every step of the recipe perfectly. And when it was done, it looked like something from a fancy restaurant. David watched me pack it up and didn't say anything about our fight from Thursday. He'd been walking on eggshells around me ever since I found out about the lies, but he still hadn't apologized. He still hadn't called his sister to tell her to stop. He was just waiting for things to blow over, like they always did. The drive to his parents' house was quiet. David tried to make small talk about work, about the weather, about some show he'd been watching, but I just gave short answers and looked out the window. He had no idea what was coming. Neither did Brittany. We pulled into the driveway, and I grabbed the dish from the back seat, holding it carefully as we walked up to the front door. My heart was beating fast, but my hands were steady. I'd practiced for this. I was ready. Brittany opened the door before we could knock, just like she always did, and her eyes went straight to the dish in my hands. Well, she said, stepping aside. Looks like Sarah finally learned to cook something decent. I'm honestly shocked it didn't come out looking like a mess. David's parents were already in the living room, his mother adjusting napkins on the dining table, his father pouring himself a drink. They both looked over when Brittany made her comment, and I waited for one of them to say something, to tell her that was rude, to defend me even a little bit. His mother just smiled, that tight smile she always had. And his father chuckled along with Brittany like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all day. She's been practicing all week, David offered. I couldn't tell if he was trying to defend me or just make conversation. Either way, it didn't help. Practicing, Brittany repeated, her eyebrows going up. For one dish? I guess some people need more help than others. She laughed at her own joke, and his parents laughed, too. And David pulled out his phone and started scrolling like he hadn't heard anything at all. I carried the dish to the kitchen and set it on the counter, taking a moment to breathe. This was exactly what I expected. This was what always happened. But tonight, it was going to end differently. Dinner started the same way it always did. We all sat around the table, passing dishes, making small talk about nothing important. I served the beef, and everyone took a portion. Brittany made a show of examining hers before taking a bite. Not bad, she said, like she was surprised. I mean, it's not as good as the restaurant version, but I guess it's fine for someone who doesn't really know what she's doing in a kitchen. David's mother nodded along. His father kept eating without looking up. And David, my husband, the man who promised to love and protect me, just kept scrolling on his phone under the table like he wasn't even part of the conversation. I ate my food and said nothing. Not yet. I knew Brittany. She always built up to her worst comments. She liked to test the waters first, see how much she could get away with before going in for the kill. I just had to wait. The conversation moved on to other topics. His father talked about golf. His mother mentioned something about redecorating the guest room. Brittany brought up the vacation she'd been planning, still not including me in any of the details. And I sat there quietly while they discussed dates and hotels like I was invisible. Then Brittany put down her fork and looked right at me with that smile I knew so well. The one that meant she was about to say something cruel and enjoy every second of it. You know, she said, her voice carrying across the table. I was just thinking about this the other day. David, do you remember when you were dating that girl from college? The one who went to law school. David finally looked up from his phone, confusion on his face. What? You know who I mean, Brittany continued. She was so smart and driven. I always thought you two would end up together. Mom and Dad loved her. His mother made a little sound of agreement. She was lovely, she said. Very accomplished, right? Brittany turned her attention back to me, her eyes sharp. I'm just saying David could have done so much better. Don't you think? She was looking directly at me when she said it. Not hinting, not being subtle, just saying it right to my face in front of everyone. The table went silent. His parents stopped eating. David's hand froze over his phone. Everyone was looking at me now, and I could feel them waiting. Waiting for me to cry like I did at that dinner 2 years ago when she made fun of my job. Waiting for me to excuse myself and hide in the bathroom like I did when she mocked my family for not having money. Waiting for me to just take it, swallow it down, and keep being the quiet, easy target I'd always been. I put my fork down slowly. I wiped my mouth with my napkin. And then I did something I'd never done before. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Actually, Brittany," I said, and my voice was calm and clear, not shaking at all. "I think it's time everyone heard what you really think of this family." Brittany's smile flickered just for a second, like she wasn't sure what was happening. "Excuse me," she said, trying to sound amused, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. She'd spent 3 years watching me crumble at her attacks. She had no idea how to handle this. "I've been keeping track," I said, holding up my phone. "Every text you've sent me, every cruel thing you've said, every lie you've told about me to the rest of the family." I looked around the table at David's parents, at David himself, at Brittany's face going pale. "Did you know that Brittany has been telling everyone I'm difficult? That I'm trying to isolate David from his family? That I'm the problem in my own marriage?" His mother's forehead wrinkled in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the truth," I said. "The truth that Brittany has been hiding behind her sweet act while she tears me apart every chance she gets. And I'm done being quiet about it." Brittany let out a nervous laugh. "Sarah, this is so dramatic. I don't know what you think you have on that phone, but this isn't the time or place for whatever this is." "No," I said, shaking my head. "This is exactly the time and place. You chose this dinner table to humiliate me week after week. So, this is where everyone is going to find out who you really are." David finally spoke up, and his voice had that warning tone I knew so well. "Sarah, come on. Let's not do this right now." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw exactly what I expected to see. Fear. Not fear for me. Not fear that I was hurt or that this had gone too far. Fear that his comfortable life was about to get messy. Fear that he might actually have to pick a side. "You've been telling me not now for 3 years, I said to him, my voice cracking slightly, but not from sadness, from the sheer, boiling rage. "Not now when she mocks me in the kitchen. Not now when she excludes me from family plans. Not now when she tells everyone I'm the villain. Well, guess what? Now is happening, whether you like it or not." I turned back to Brittany, who was gripping her wine glass so tight her knuckles were white. "Let's start with the texts," I said, unlocking my phone. "I think everyone deserves to know what you really say when you think no one is watching." The look on Brittany's face when I didn't crumble was worth 3 years of her garbage. The way her smile twisted into something ugly and fake. She actually laughed, a nervous sound that tried to be dismissive, but came out shaky. "Oh, please, Sarah. You're not going to sit here and make up stories," she said, but her voice wasn't as confident as it had been 5 minutes ago. David started to say my name, that warning tone creeping in, like he always used when he thought I was about to embarrass him in front of his family. "Sarah, maybe we should talk about this at home." But I was done protecting everyone's comfort at the cost of my dignity. Done making myself smaller so they could feel better. I had screenshots of every cruel text she'd sent me over the past 3 years. I had the voicemail she left me last month calling me a gold digger when she thought I wouldn't save it. I had 3 years of receipts and a table full of people who were about to learn exactly who they'd been defending all this time. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for all week, the moment Brittany's mask came off. I scrolled to the first text and held my phone up so everyone could see the screen, even though I was going to read it out loud anyway. "This is from 6 months ago," I said, my voice steady. Brittany texted me and said, "Make sure you bring dessert to dinner on Sunday, since we all know you can't handle anything more complicated than that." I looked at David's mother. "That was the week I made the entire meal by myself because Brittany told me you weren't feeling well and needed help." His mother's face went still. "I never said I needed help," she murmured. But I was already moving on to the next one. "Here's another one from 4 months ago," I said, scrolling down. "David deserves someone who actually comes from a good family, not whatever trailer park situation you crawled out of." That's a direct quote, by the way. I let the words hang in the air. She sent that after the dinner where she asked about my parents, and I told her they passed away when I was young. The room was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Brittany's face had gone from pale to red, her jaw tight, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Those are taken out of context," she said quickly. "You're twisting my words." "Am I?" I asked, tilting my head. "Let me read a few more, and you can tell me what context makes them okay." I kept going, reading text after text, watching the faces around the table change with each one. There was the one where she called me a gold digger who trapped David. There was the one where she said I was too stupid to know I was being insulted. There was the one where she laughed about how easy it was to make me cry at Christmas dinner 2 years ago. But the best one, the one I'd been saving, was still coming. I paused and looked at David's parents. Really looked at them. They'd spent 3 years watching their daughter treat me like garbage, and they'd never said a word. They'd laughed at her jokes and nodded along with her comments and pretended not to notice when she made me feel like nothing. I wanted to know if they'd keep defending her after this. "This next one is interesting," I said, scrolling to the text I'd found last month. "Brittany sent this to me after the dinner where you both agreed with her that I should be the one to clean up the kitchen by myself. She was thanking me for being such an easy target, and then she said this." I took a breath and read the words out loud. "Thank God Mom and Dad are such useful idiots. They take my side every single time without even thinking about it. All I have to do is smile, and they believe whatever I tell them about you. It's almost too easy." The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't just uncomfortable quiet. This was shock. David's mother put her hand over her mouth. His father's face went dark red. And for the first time since I'd known him, he actually looked angry. "What did you just say?" he asked, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Brittany. "She's lying," Brittany said immediately, her voice high and fast. "I never wrote that. She made it up. She probably edited those screenshots or something. You know how easy it is to fake texts these days." She looked around the table desperately, searching for someone who would believe her, who would take her side like they always did. "This is crazy. You're all actually going to believe her over me? I'm your daughter." David's mother was staring at Brittany like she'd never seen her before. "Did you really say that about us?" she asked. And her voice was small and hurt in a way I'd never heard before. "Of course not." Brittany slammed her hand on the table. "She's making this whole thing up because she can't handle that nobody in this family likes her. She's been trying to turn everyone against me since the day David brought her home." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, someone else spoke up. A voice I didn't expect. "Actually, that's not true." Everyone turned to look at the doorway where Mark was standing. David's cousin, who I'd only met a few times at family events. I didn't even know he was coming to dinner tonight. He must have arrived while we were all sitting down, let himself in through the back like family always did at this house. He walked into the dining room slowly, looking at Brittany with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I ran into Sarah's friend at a coffee shop last week," he said. "She told me some things that made me think." So, I started paying more attention to what Brittany was saying about Sarah when she wasn't around. Brittany's face went even paler. "Mark, this is none of your business. You told me Sarah was trying to isolate David from the family," Mark continued, ignoring her. "You told me she was controlling and difficult, and that David was miserable, but too nice to leave her. You told me all kinds of stuff about her, and I believed you because you're family, and I had no reason not to." He shook his head slowly. "But none of it was true, was it? You were just saying whatever you needed to say to make everyone hate her." Brittany stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked by my own family." "No one is attacking you," I said. "I'm just telling the truth. Something you should try sometime." The look she gave me was pure hatred. The mask completely gone now. This was the real Brittany. The one she'd been hiding behind that sweet smile for years. The one who called her parents useful idiots and destroyed my reputation for fun. The one who made me feel worthless and alone in my own marriage while my husband did nothing. Speaking of my husband, I looked over at David, who had been sitting there silent through all of this. His phone was finally off the table, his hands folded in front of him, his eyes moving between me and Brittany like he was watching a tennis match. I waited for him to say something. To finally, after 3 years, stand up and tell his sister that what she did was wrong. To apologize for all the times he'd looked the other way. To choose me just once over keeping the peace with Brittany. Everyone at the table was waiting, too. His parents were looking at him. Mark was looking at him. Even Brittany was looking at him, probably expecting him to smooth things over like he always did. David cleared his throat. He opened his mouth. And the words that came out broke whatever was left of my heart. Sarah, he said slowly, carefully, like he was talking to a child throwing a tantrum. This isn't the time or place for this. I stared at him. After everything I'd just shared. After all the texts I'd read out loud. After his own cousin confirmed that Brittany had been spreading lies. After his parents heard their daughter call them useful idiots. After all of that, the only thing David had to say was that this wasn't the time or place. Are you serious right now? I asked, and I heard my voice crack just a little. Not from sadness, from the absolute disbelief that this man, the man I'd married, the man I defended to my friends when they told me I deserved better, could still be this much of a coward. I just think we should talk about this privately, he said, glancing at his parents like he was embarrassed. This is a family dinner. We don't need to air all our problems in front of everyone. Our problems. I repeated. David, your sister has been making my life miserable for 3 years. She's been lying to everyone in your family about who I am. She literally called your parents idiots in a text message. And you're worried about making dinner awkward. He held up his hands like he was trying to calm me down. I'm just saying this could have been handled differently. You didn't have to do this in front of everyone. We could have talked to Brittany privately and worked things out. I felt something click into place in my chest. Something final. This was who he was. This was who he'd always been. Not a man caught in the middle, trying to keep everyone happy. Not a man who loved me but didn't know how to handle conflict. He was a man who would watch his wife be destroyed rather than have an uncomfortable conversation. He was a man who would tell me I was overreacting while his sister called me trash. He was a man who would never ever choose me. I pushed my chair back and stood up. The sound it made against the floor was loud in the silent room. You're right, I said, looking straight at David. There's never a good time for you to choose me. I picked up my purse from where I'd hung it on the back of my chair. My hands weren't shaking. My voice wasn't breaking. I felt calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. So, I'm done waiting. I walked around the table, past David's mother, who was still staring at Brittany in shock. Past his father, who looked like he didn't know what to do with his hands. Past Mark, who gave me a small nod that might have been respect. Brittany said something as I passed her, something about how I was being dramatic and making a scene, but I didn't even look at her. She didn't matter anymore. None of them did. I stopped at the dining room doorway and turned back one last time. David was still sitting there, frozen, like he couldn't believe I was actually leaving. Like he'd spent so long watching me take it that he'd forgotten I had the option to go. I loved you, I said to him, my voice clear. I loved you enough to put up with all of this for 3 years, because I thought you'd eventually stand up for me. But you never did. And now I know you never will. I turned and walked through the living room, past the family photos on the walls where I'd never really belonged anyway. Past the couch where I'd sat through so many dinners, feeling invisible and worthless. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool evening air. Behind me, I could hear voices rising. Brittany shouting that I was crazy. David's mother asking Brittany if all those texts were real. His father saying something about how they needed to have a serious conversation. David calling my name, finally. Too late. Like he just realized what he was losing. I closed the door behind me and walked to my car. The keys were in my hand before I even realized I'd pulled them out. I unlocked the door, got in, and just sat there for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel, looking at the house where I'd spent 3 years trying to earn a place I was never going to get. The front door opened, and David came running out, his face panicked, his mouth moving, saying my name over and over. But I was already turning the key in the ignition, already putting the car in reverse, already choosing myself for the first time in 3 years. I backed out of the driveway and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. Whatever chaos was happening in that house, whatever fallout was coming from Brittany's exposure, whatever David was going to say to try to fix this, none of it was my problem anymore. For the first time since I'd married into that family, I felt like I could breathe. It's astonishing how much courage it takes to finally choose yourself, especially when you've spent so long trying to belong. Have you ever reached a point where you realized someone you loved would never stand up for you? What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below.